Hey guys, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam, and today I want to share a very special insight that arose this week during meditation, which has to do with some of the themes that I've been touching on in the last few videos, especially around repression and the capacity to feel, which is, of course, one of the red threads in the channel and the kind of methods that are advised for self-cultivation, self-realization. Now, I've titled this video Held Hostage or Ruling Over the Body-Mind because the insight that came up was one in which, through enough cultivation of the capacity to feel whatever the body-mind throws at you, you can flip the script on the way that you've been navigating your humanity, if you will. And so in order to describe what I mean by that, if I was to, let's say, simplify it into its core meaning, I would say that before self-cultivation, we are engaged in an all-out and compulsive, if not overt, effort to appease and placate a body-mind system that is constantly threatening us to feel bad unless we have the right emotions, think the right thoughts, and do the right actions, all geared towards obtaining the right result so that we can feel good, right? So that's the way the game is constructed on that level. And it became rather clear to me during meditation, and also been leading up to that point through some readings, especially of Nisargadatta Maharaj, who says that the ego is a full-blown tyrant and that we are completely bound by it, that the dominance of the ego over us is absolute. And so this became clear during meditation when I saw the other side of that equation, or the other game that could be played. So the other game that can be played is one in which we use our awareness to allow every possible shape or configuration of that body-mind to come to the surface, so to come from the subconscious to the conscious, and we do not negotiate with it. We don't back away from it. We don't try to push it away. We don't try to rationalize it. All we do is actually let it come. And when we do enough of that, awareness becomes capable of sustaining the intensity of thoughts and emotions and physical affects that come to the surface, that bubble up, if you will, to the conscious mind, and demonstrates to the ego that it can no longer be coerced, that it can no longer be threatened, and that it won't be forced or scared into submission, into disassociation or compulsive action to appease an ego that feels bad. Before that, we may as well consider that we are in a full-blown hostage situation in which the super ego, or the judge in our head, is constantly watching to see that we do, between quotes, the right thing, so that it can feel okay with itself, so that we can be allowed to feel okay with ourselves based on past experience, based on what was rewarded in our upbringing, mostly, or societally rewarded. And so the judge is looking, ready to judge, ready to pass negative judgment the second we are painting outside of the lines, and ready to punish us with very nasty thoughts, and most importantly, because that's what carries the real punishing weight, very disagreeable emotions and bodily affects that we really don't like to feel. That's the price to pay when we paint outside of the lines, when we step outside of our own self-created boundaries or self-imposed boundaries, boundaries that were self-imposed when we were young as a defense mechanism or as a mechanism to please the significant other in exchange for sustenance and love. It's a hostage situation. It started as a defense mechanism, and then it becomes a full-blown life in the service of a superego and a significant other that is not even there anymore other than in our own mind. So we are self-policing from that point onwards and held hostage by our very own mind. And the more you realize this and the closer you look, then I would take the Gurdjieff angle at saying that it is truly a horrific situation to be in. Because it just so happens that we are not in control of what our mind thinks, and also not in control of what our body feels. And yet there is a part of the mind that punishes when we don't think or feel or act in the right way. So we are not in control of the cause, and we are punished when the effect is incorrect. That's a horrific situation to be in, as a matter of fact. If you really carefully look at this situation, you cannot help but be actually horrified at it. And that's exactly what Gurdjieff said. He said that man, first of all, man believes himself to be free, so you cannot even convince him that he is bound by his own mind, and that with enough mindfulness and enough self-study, you come to realize that you find yourself in a really rather horrific situation, trying to appease an imaginary significant other that punishes you when you think, emote, or act in ways that you cannot possibly control to begin with. And therefore, fear. And therefore, lack of fulfillment, lack of happiness, lack of fundamental being okay with oneself. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, the mechanism that starts it all is not an evil mechanism, it's a self-protection and survival mechanism. Our very survival depends on being able to please the significant others early in life. And this just then carries on forward forever until our grave, typically, unless we challenge that mechanism. The challenging of that mechanism that holds us hostage, that pretends to be the ruler, this judge of the mind, is an exceptionally difficult endeavor for most people. That mechanism that watches over and wants to make sure that you are okay and feeling okay and surviving is not just going to hand itself over and surrender because we read a spiritual book, or because we are truly convinced that we are one with the universe, or because we profess a certain type of faith, or because we believe ourselves to be spiritual and talk softly, or any of that stuff. And unless our mind and psychosomatics are very well primed and geared towards an immediate awakening, this is not going to happen, which means that many of the videos that are out there in the YouTube sphere, which seem to get tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of views, with titles around the like of "disappear for a month and realize yourself," or "this is the last video you'll ever need to watch," or "give me 5 minutes and I will show you, universal unity consciousness," are idiotic, to say the least. It's ridiculous what level that whole thing has sank into. This process is a very difficult process. Awareness needs to properly develop and prove its capacity to rule over the body mind before the ego even begins to consider surrendering. In other words, the ego will constantly be throwing affects and thoughts and emotions at us, or rather, our system will simply be, these things will be arising, and we cannot outsmart or trick or bypass the ego and go, I'm going to be all spiritual about this and not care or whatever. We need to show that we have the capacity to sit with whatever comes forth from the body mind without the need to change it in any shape, way, or form. Any desire to change the way we think and feel implicitly demonstrates that somehow we are not okay with it, that we don't have the capacity to contain whatever affect is coming to the surface, that we have not yet fully felt and colonized and integrated the physical, emotional, and narrative level meaning of that entire package of information that is coming forth from our system. And so long as that's not the case, then that part of the ego will continue doing its protective job of not allowing us to feel that, and therefore seeking pleasure or control in the world, or fawning, or going into la la land and fantasizing everything rather than actually directly feeling that, because we've proven that we can't. We've shown through our squirming or attacking or negotiating or you name it, that our awareness has not yet developed the capacity to actually feel what needs to be felt in that part of the mind. Now, as awareness develops the capacity to fully feel that part of the mind and other difficult parts of the mind, it starts to become rather apparent to the mind itself that it has now developed the capacity to feel everything that arises in consciousness without squirming, disassociating, or attacking or projecting. And by, the ego then begins to relinquish its control, because it is clear that as useful and protective as that control is, it's a very crude mechanism, and its crudeness is painful, but more importantly, its crudeness is effective at not allowing us to feel things that we can now feel. So once we are able to feel those things, that crude mechanism goes, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not necessary. It's not necessary for me to go into protection and contraction if the thing can just be felt. It really is as simple as that, right? As I usually quote the Matrix in the words of Morpheus, you don't need to learn how to dodge bullets. When you're ready, you won't have to, right? You can simply take the bullet or do whatever you want with it. It's not that important anymore. At this point, when enough of that has been done, a certain gestalt or a certain general picture starts to arise in which the mind recognizes that it's got the general capacity, the general aware integrity to sustain anything that comes up. And that means that awareness starts to rule over the body mind, and you feel like you are almost like a benevolent ruler that allows all these little things to bubble to the surface, and you deal with them not by controlling them, not by forcing them in a different direction or doing anything to them. You rule over them through your capacity to fully feel them. This is a capacity that the ego never had and would never understand, because its job is a different job. Its job is to suppress them and to project into the outside world and attack or fight or flight, in essence, right? So the ego can never do what awareness does, which is really just to sustain and observe. The ego's idea of what control over the body-mind is to force the body-mind to do something different. And for a while, that might be the case because some things are just too difficult to feel. Some realities, some truths are incredibly unpalatable to the body-mind. The reality of impermanence, the idea that we're going to die, that we are, as a body-mind, a very flimsy mechanism that can be killed or hurt or abandoned. Right? These are really, really profound and very nasty things to find ourselves situation-wise. But if digested, then we can simply allow them to be the case, and that gives us mastery over them. A mastery that does not depend on changing internal or external circumstances, but which simply has the capacity to metabolize reality in its raw form and then do whatever it wants, essentially, right? Just carry on, act, think, and emote appropriately. Now, when we do enough of the work, we can then start to see both sides of this equation. When we haven't done enough of the work, first of all, we don't even know we're a hostage. Then we realize we're a hostage, but there's not much we can do about it. And a lot of attempts will arise in I have awareness now that I'm a hostage of the body-mind, and I will try to change it. I will try to change things instead of simply validate what's coming to the foreground. A, because I don't know that that's what I'm supposed to do, and B, because even though I say that I'm trying to feel, in reality, what I'm trying to do is to feel good. And eventually, the tables start to turn. A couple of days ago during meditation, I started to feel more like the awareness that rules over the body-mind by simply having the capacity to fully acknowledge and observe and be in touch with what the body-mind is doing. And it felt like this sort of like a benevolent, non-intrusive rulership that simply knows that it can be okay regardless of what the body-mind is doing. And that's a flip. It's a very interesting flip. It felt like literally kind of turning a page or things changing. The dynamic of the practice felt like it was changing. And there was a lot of back and forth before that for quite a few months, learning what the purpose was of this whole thing, and then putting it into practice, and then feeling that switch. What it essentially felt like was that I was honoring and in fact worshiping the exact shape and form that consciousness was taking at that point, even if it was very painful, because that was an honoring of what I fundamentally am. That any departure from how I think, feel, or act, any idea that it should be different, is an invalidation and cannot possibly come from me. It can only come from memory that was learned in a different circumstance, right? So that's what you see memory and entrainment of how you should feel coming into play. Any idea of how you should feel that is different than how you do feel would have to be coming from something other than you, a memory that you acquired elsewhere. Because why would you ever think that you should feel different than you do, right? Like, where would that come from, other than not from you? And if you then develop the capacity to feel as you do every time around, then you are kind of doing a sort of self-worship, a worship of your more fundamental self. So you are really honoring yourself, and that starts to feel incredibly empowering and wholesome as well. And and it feels like the kind of self-love that has nothing to do with liking yourself. which is interesting, right? We tend to confuse self-love with liking our traits, right? Liking ourselves physically, or that kind of thing. And it's not about that. It's simply uh, having the capacity to allow every shape that your mind body system takes at any point in time, and having the capacity to fully acknowledge that without any reservations whatsoever, knowing that it is correct because it's already there, because that's what you are at that point in time. And that's the rulership of awareness over the rulership of the ego, which only really knows about control and manipulation, and trying to push and pull on things so that one can feel better or safe. So the gist of today's video is about our situations as hostages of the body-mind before cultivation is done, and rulers over the body-mind after cultivation is done, but not a rulership that is a controlling one, but rather an aware type of situation, which is very different than what we might expect when going into this process. I was very keen on sharing this today, so for those of you who have made it all the way through the end of the video, I hope that was helpful on some level. Very curious to hear your thoughts as usual on the comment section. I should have probably started with this at the beginning of the video, but I really do appreciate your comments. I really read each and every one of them very carefully. They give me energy. They make me feel engaged with the audience, both some of the regulars and also some of you guys who are new to the channel. It's truly encouraging to continue with this path of both my practice and also the comms that I put out there. So thanks for that. And if you think that this is worth sharing and subscribing, then do so. And I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. And thanks for watching. Cheerio and bye-bye.